Mystery. To some it scares, but to others it drags them in more. Something about the unknown. The human brain just wants more, and it draws you in. The mystery about the Japanese car scene is what indeed draws you in. Before the time of the widespread internet and cameras in everyone's back pocket was when the Japanese car culture was at an absolute peak, meaning that most of what we know about the famous underground car scene in Japan is just stories and a few recordings. Out of all the mysteries at the underground car scene, there's a street racing group that has a legendary status and notorious for traveling at high speeds on public highways, being the Midnight Club, a famous street racing group that is very little known about them, to not knowing who the drivers are, to barely knowing why and how they started and ended. All of this just adds to the status of being mysterious and a legendary street racing group. Before the video starts, I just want you to be aware that not everything you hear about the Midnight Club might be true. It might be a myth or exaggerated. I try to get as much information when I research, so I make sure that is very unlikely. Although, when you hear about the Midnight Club, with all the mysteries and no records of them, everything you hear might not be entirely true. Just be aware of that as you watch the video. In the 80s, Japan was very different than today. There was a culture in Japan after World War II to save a lot of money. So in the 80s, people had a lot of money in the bank to spend. So companies started making cars that were fast, and people in Japan could buy them, which led to tons of people getting their hands on the cars. They had way too much power, and they started street racing. Many highways in Japan were infamous for street racing during the night. And you may have already seen this coming, because so many people who had just gotten their license started zipping down highways, it became very dangerous. Many severe accidents would happen, so much so that figures say that at least 50 people would die each year, about one a week, and many others would get seriously injured. The fact that happened, the Japanese government decided to do something. I talked about this in my Super video, but they forced the manufacturers to get a gentleman's agreement that they could not make cars that had over 276 horsepower. Now, seeing that some of their best-selling cars had more than 276 horsepower, many of the manufacturers continued, and they did this by either lying about how much the power the cars are making, or by putting limiters on the car that were very easy to remove, and making the cars very easily modified for high power. Because of this, the street racing scene continued, and street racing began to grow groups, either to race for bets or status. The Over 220 group, Tokyo Group Shadow, Tops Racing, and others were all well-known street racing groups. With this being the climate in Japan, the Midnight Club was founded in 1987. It started off as a group of friends having fun, but they quickly became more and more competitive, as they started driving on the new Wangan after police started cracking down on other highways. With a strict code of ethics, the Midnight Club would not put any members of the public or any other driving clubs in danger, going as far as always driving at least one lane away from any other pedestrian traffic, always having hazards on, while adding more lights to the bumpers and having a brighter paint job to get as many people's attention to see them racing so they would not crash. To get into the Midnight Club, you had to have a lot of requirements, such as a car that can consistently go over 250 kilometers an hour. But you would be expected that you could consistently go over speeds of 300 kilometers an hour. Common cars that were used were Italian exotics, such as the Testarossa and Countach. Faster cars from Japan were modified, such as the 300ZX, Supra, and RX-7, along with the famous Porsches that were in the Midnight Club. Just because you had a fast car doesn't mean that you would be automatically a part of the Midnight Club. You would first get a pink Midnight Club sticker, which represents that you are an apprentice. And after a couple years and you show your mastery of your car, you get the prestigious gray Midnight bumper sticker, always placed horizontally, to show that you are a member of the Midnight Club. To get a gray bumper sticker, You would have to be able to drive your car at high speeds and be comfortable without fear of losing control of the car. If you show any fear or you lose control of the car, you will never become a Midnight Club member because you will put other people in danger while racing. Once you are in the Midnight Club, there was a lot of anonymity between you and the others. This was intentional, and part of the reason why it's so hard to find information on the Midnight Club. Drivers were referred to by their first name only, and were now to talk about each other's personal lives, and was a very tight-lipped community. One of the coolest parts of where they met up the next time they met, they would put an ad in the newspaper that read this: "For sale, small handbags at discount prices. For more information, I'm available for a meetup at Daikoku parking area between Thursday at 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Thank you." This is a really cool piece of lore, but unfortunately, it was just a myth because the members of the group called each other on their phones. From record-breaking Japanese cars to record-breaking Euro cars, the Midnight Club has some of the most impressive tuning cars ever. The club did not care about how rich or poor you were, or your political views, or even what car you drove. As long as you could go fast, that's what they all cared about. But this was very different to other racing groups at the time driving in Japan. So the Midnight Club was home to some of the most famous tuning cars ever. The first car was owned by one of the founders of the club, Ichi Yoshida, who owned a Porsche 930 Turbo. With the same dedication he had to make the Midnight Club on top, he modified his 930. With the help of other team members, he added forged pistons and a big turbo. And this alone, he almost hit 300 kilometers an hour. For many, this would be enough, but not for him. He asked Porsche themselves to make the Porsche faster by using technology from the racing team, and to make it look as stock as possible so people would be unsuspecting. After multiple variations and a blown engine, he had built a legendary car that allegedly cost $2 million. He was not the only person in the Midnight Club to drive a Porsche, since they were so good at racing already, and once someone got their hands on them, an expert mechanic maybe, it could make the car even better. Another famous car from the Midnight Club is the Devil Z, based on the rare variant of the Datsun Z, the 432. The car had a naturally aspirated LT30 engine that was producing 630 brake horsepower. That was absolutely insane for the time. Some other famous cars being in the club were the Countach, Testarossa, Evo, 300ZX, the Supra, and of course the RX-7. Unfortunately, the Midnight Club no longer exists. The group disbanded in 1999. There are many different stories on why the club stopped. One of the most famous was that there was a horrible crash that killed multiple people when they were racing down the expressway with Boazuku drivers, and an incident happened where 6 drivers and multiple civilians ended up in the hospital, and one of them died, breaking the one rule that no one can be hurt or injured by them racing. But it turned out that that was a lie because there was no evidence or records of this accident. And it turned out that many of the members did not like the fact that the Midnight Club was becoming such a status symbol, and more competitive, and less focused on just having fun with friends, which is how it started. The Midnight Club is now much more successful than just a street racing group, now being known worldwide and having multiple media forms about them, such as an anime called Wangan Midnight and a video game series. After they broke up, the cars involved were either destroyed or hidden away, and all the members were banned from speaking of any of the activities that happened while they were racing. The whole story of the Midnight Club seems almost like a movie or an anime, but to the members of the Midnight Club, they were just having fun with friends, nothing more than that.